I think my last slide, I think this is my last slide, is about the role of data and the loss of qualitative evaluation in higher education. So the external assessment of higher ed has just increased exponentially. Whether you're talking about how much information accrediting agencies for all the different programs want, whether you're looking at the kind of reporting that the State Board of Education here in Idaho expects us to be able to give, the kind of information that external funders and that kind of thing want. That external assessment machine has skyrocketed, and it has grown for good reasons. It's grown because higher ed was too long a little boys club where we didn't really worry about whether we were doing what we said we were doing with the money that we got. And so I want to own that. There were issues, and I think a lot of the assessment of higher ed that has gone on has revealed some pretty significant issues and has improved the quality of higher education and certainly improved access. But it's also had a very perverse effects. And first of all, it takes a lot of time and money, and I think this kind of assessment and data collection is responsible in large measure for the explosion of middle administration in public higher education. I mean, you're either gonna have faculty on a committee do it, which is uber inefficient, or you gotta pay an administrator to collect this information and to keep it and to monitor it and the programs that generate it, and then they do some other stuff also. But really, we wouldn't need nearly as many of them if we didn't have to report as much information to the people out there. We could function in the old world we were in. Now, there's a happy medium there. I'm not one of those growth of administration is disastrous for higher education. I like the fact that those administrators are out there doing that stuff, and I don't have to. But I think some of the information we're gathering is just information for information's sake because we can get it, and not because anybody's using it anymore today for useful things. So the other thing is, this assessment process is driven almost exclusively by quantitative data. Qualitative data is harder to gather. You've got to actually talk to people, and have people complete surveys and interpret narrative answers, right? And that takes a lot of time. Somebody's got to go through and code things, and we've got to kind of agree on what the coding is if we're going to interpret a narrative survey, or we got to do interviews or focus groups. They're time consuming, they're expensive, and we want the data, we want the information faster, so we just look for what can we measure. And what happens is that we only value what we can measure with quantitative data. We slowly stop valuing the stuff that we can't measure with quantitative data. And I don't know about all of you, but I'm not a quantitative person, I'm a qualitative person. And I think there's just a whole lot to be measured that we're losing. It's a whole lot of value that we're losing because we can't measure it with quantitative data. Whether it's the value of those one-on-one mentoring relationships that you develop between faculty and students and extend beyond the area of law in the classroom. I just had a student coming in and saying, you talk all the time in family law about all these challenges, and I'm involved with somebody who's also a law student, and we're getting kind of serious, and how do you balance the competition? It's a half-an-hour conversation about something that had nothing to do with what we taught in law school, and how do you measure the benefit for those conversations? There's hundreds of them every day at the university. And I think when all of us look back on our higher education experience, it's not the detailed knowledge we gained in class that was really the thing that was the most important. For me, I'll get emotionally using the example, the most influential person was my freshman advisor. She was a Black activist who was really a writer for PBS and was really involved in the fight, in the apartheid fight in South Africa. And I was this little upper middle class white kid from Pennsylvania. And the first thing she had us do was write an essay called, a personal essay that could be on anything that we wanted it to be. And I thought I was a big shot because I had won the Miss Flame competition the summer before. It was around the bicentennial. And I had written an essay on what America means to me for the Miss Flame competition. And we could write our essay for her on anything we wanted. So I took my Miss Flame competition, essay, which was of course good because I won, and I tweaked it a little bit and I turned it in to this black social activist. It was all about truth, justice, and the American way, and the melting pot, and all the stuff you learn in high school, or you learned in high school in the 60s and 70s. I'm looking at a bunch of other gray hairs, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it didn't have very much to do with reality for black Americans, certainly, for my professor in particular. And she handed it back to me the next day, and she said, "Can you write on something else? I can't grade this." Wasn't an auspicious start, and I'll tell you what she said to me years and years later. And of course, I was the dutiful person. I was in tears. I didn't know what I'd gone wrong, but I went back and wrote on something else, which she graded and commented on. I just was so mesmerized. The first day I went to her class, I left this out. It was freshman orientation. She had broken her leg, so we had to go to her house for class. And she was lying in her house with this African dress on her couch. It was a house like no other house I'd ever been in, filled with books and all the memorabilia of a life of travel and international engagement. And she was drinking a martini out of a real martini cup. Now, this little white Pennsylvania kid had never seen a martini cup except on James Bond movies. You know, so it was just kind of like, where am I? I was so wanted to please her that I didn't take her comments negatively, and I rewrote that essay and stuck with her, and she ended up being a mentor to me throughout my college. I saw her about 20 years ago. She was in the nursing home. I went to visit her when I was back at Worcester, and she looked at me and she said, "You know, I never understood why you stuck with me. That note I put on your first paper is the worst thing I've ever said to a student, and I was really upset and I shouldn't have done it." She said, "I just feel like I need to apologize to you now." And I said, "Oh, Annetta, it was the biggest wake-up call, and I needed it in a major sort of way." But how do you measure that? How do you measure that? Her influence has driven me for my entire adult life. Wanting to do things that I think she would value or be proud of. I think about her, I got that diversity award last year at the Wells Farm Hall. Annetta would be proud of me. It was a thought in my brain. You think about those kinds of things, we don't measure them anymore. So I worry a ton about the impact that this is having, how it's gonna be affecting our activities. The quantitative and assessment movement is affecting our curriculum. The need to conform our curriculum to other institutions in the state. It's being driven a lot by this assessment. It's also being driven by access issues, so there's positive good things about it. But it means our math people are saying, you know, hey, we've got kids that really need to take another level of math, because here at the University of Idaho, our math classes are actually harder than they are at LC. And our kids aren't ready to go into this class, and they're flunking. But because we need to conform that curriculum, we're in the position of having to say, well, we can't have this extra class, it doesn't fit in, it can't transfer. What do you do with it? These students took this, and you have to take these credits from this other school for this course that has the same name and the same number. So all of a sudden you got a bunch of faculty going back and saying, okay, how do we tweak and make this course work? So I think that's also having a pretty big effect on the university. Now we've got big national nonprofits that are involved, some of them offering very helpful advice on some of these how to engage students' issues and things like that. But each one of them is sucking down administrative time for a different model, for a, one that doesn't quite fit with what the state board is saying we're doing, and how do we, then we just have a raft of fallout as we try to make all those pieces fit together into something that's coherent. So anyway, those are my slides. It's maybe 10 minutes for questions, yeah.
So several of your comments made me